All right, guys, here is the gear. We've got Barrister and Mann Amazelnut in the soft heart base. As you can see, it's a sample puck. And we are going to be using the Blackland era. And this Platinum Super is what came with it. It turns out to be a great blade for me as well, just because he includes any vendor, for instance. Just because they include a certain blade, it doesn't mean that's the best one with their razor, because any good vendor knows that that's a very subjective thing. And so maybe they're just sending along a good blade in hopes that it works for you, but just sending along something so that you can get started right away, right? And it's best if they do send along a blade that's popular with a lot of guys, because then there's a greater chance it's going to work well for more people. Amazelnut is a soap that I've really been enjoying the smell of just from the tub on a regular basis. The Excelsior line of Semogue brushes has kind of come to an end in recent months, and this one is still the Excelsior, and this is the 1438. It's the extra grade hair, and he's one of the very few that hasn't actually seen a downgrade in the hair quality, because he is the one that has the extra grade, and it's those the best and the other ones that are being downgraded to extra. But this guy really didn't bother me too much. Last time I used him, I was reminded of his pretty strong backbone, but the tips aren't scritchy or anything like that. And so I look forward to more treatments with him, with more uses to help the tip split, as well as the hair dryer treatments that are coming, because after this use, he'll have 27 uses under him. And that's my little point where I am choosing with my Boar rotation of brushes to put in 5 uses of hair dryer before I use him again, for his 28th use. All right, let's go ahead and put that blade in the era. And this blade has got either 4 or 5 uses on it. Still quite young for me. I usually can pretty easily get a lot more uses than that on there. I was hesitant to even try the level 1 base plate, which is what we're using today, because my experience with the level 2 was quite mild and kind of ineffectual after 3 passes, and even after 4 passes I didn't quite have the shave that I wanted. But that was with another blade, and that other blade must just not quite have been, it was a Nasset with about 6 uses on it. It just must not have been a good match for this razor. Nasset does really, really well for me in most other razors, and there's nothing wrong with that. That is kind of to be expected for sometimes that to happen, because the geometries of razors are different. Hey, I also wanted to mention, Simple Forging sent me a question in the comments a while back, and he would really appreciate talking about hearing advice on watching your lather hydration, things to look for. And while that is something that I've put in a lot of my videos sporadically, I never really made a note of it to be as complete as possible. And so that's what we're kind of going to try to do with today's shave, as well as just do a normal shave. And so we'll be looking at it as we go. As we have a sample here, this is much too small to load from the tub, of course. And so my method is to take a 1/4 teaspoon measure. And I find that amount for almost every soap out there, with just maybe 2 or 3 exceptions, is plenty to get the job done. And so I put that on my finger. You could estimate, once you do this enough, you could probably have a good idea without using a measuring spoon, right? But I mean, that just happens to be a good little scooper as well. You could put more than 1 shave's worth. You could smear the bottom. I mean, some people get a 1 ounce puck of sterling, the sample of sterling, and they just smear the thing in the bottom of their bowl completely. And they use it as a loading bowl. And maybe they're a face latherer, and that's just fine if you want to do that. But see, I'm a bowl latherer, and so I definitely need to, at some point, only to have as much as I'm going to use in 1 shave in the bowl. Otherwise, you're never able to kind of quit adding soap and then develop it further by mixing without adding any more soap. That is an important step, at least in my own lather method. Just rinsing off my fingers. Get the pressing into the bottom is a whole lot easier when your hands are dry. All right, so that's what about a quarter teaspoon looks in the bottom of the bowl here. And I may have a fancy looking lather bowl, right? But if you don't worry about it. Just get a cereal bowl or a soup bowl. The Dollar Tree has a lot of bowls that are kind of this, a few different options for this size and shape. About 5 inches across is what my preference is. Most of the other lather bowls you see online are a lot smaller, and so I don't like them as much, but you might. But I recommend trying out soup bowls, salad bowls, even an espresso mug, those different kind of shaped items to see what you like. This is a small brush, and so I could actually get away. This little 1438. He's a small guy, and so he could, if there was anything that works with like that Captain's Choice size bowl and that kind of thing, then it would be him. But all my other brushes are bigger than him pretty much, and so I like something like this. So as we look for hydration points, as we build up the lather, it matters a lot what I'm going to see here in the next few seconds. Matters how much water I have in my brush here. Okay, and right now it's still, I could shake it and get some more drips. As you can see, my personal preference is not to start with a loaded brush. Some people do that. Some people actually will have their full tub of soap. They'll pull the brush out of the water, they'll hold it kind of like this and give it a couple of shakes. And then the rest of the water they want to keep in there. And then they're going very wet on top of their soap. And if that works for you, then great. There's definitely a way to do that. But that's not my particular enjoyment. And so I like to shake out a lot of the water, but I leave it lightly wet. I don't squeeze it. Some people do that. I recommend you try all these methods. Try the lots of water method. Try the squeezing it method. Give each different type of method several tries so you can evaluate it properly. And so with mine, it's still quite wet. Call it lightly wet, but it hasn't been squeezed out. It's not damp. It's more wet than a damp word would signify. And so then what you do when I start going here, I will immediately see some wet airiness, and that's because the brush pretty quickly releases enough water to kind of overwhelm the soap. And that's just fine, because in a minute you'll see that it's going to incorporate all that soap into that water, and that wetness will be gone. This is the Soft Heart base, and now with Soft Heart, you know what, it might be better for me to get a little bit more soap. And that's kind of why it's called the Soft Heart base. Although it is, now in this case, it's being kind of slow to come up off the floor of the bowl here. You can see that, but now look, we don't have any of that watery stuff there. It's been, as we're combining the water and the soap, it's looking more like a lather. And because of this quantity right here, I think that I will add some more, because this is the Soft Heart base, and that is a little different than your average base. He requires more product. I mean, it's possible that may not be needed, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to add not even half of this measure. This is a quarter teaspoon, so it's not even an eighth, but I'm just going to add this little bit more to it. There is a disadvantage to adding too much soap into your lather bowl, and that disadvantage would be it takes longer to build your lather. It takes more water and more work to get the lather that you want. And so while it's a safe bet to put more soap in there than you need, yeah, it's probably better to do that than to not put in as much soap, right? But I prefer to not overdo it a lot unless I'm just having a special trouble dialing in a soap, and then sure, I'll go nuts and add a lot more soap than is needed just to cover my bases. And then what you are going to get after as you start to kind of combine the water we're dealing with here that was in the brush with the soap that you put in the bottom of the bowl, is a kind of a paste maybe not too thick, but relatively speaking, kind of thick. You may even hear dry sounds from your brush working the bowl. Because now I've pretty much combined all the water with the soap, and you can see it is kind of a little bit pasty. For those of you veterans, you know what that looks like. And as you if you're new, then that's something you'll get, reasonably quickly. And so now what I've got now is I'm gonna just add some water. If you, I'm not saying you have to add a certain amount of water. That's not what I'm about with this graduated piece of equipment here. Okay, that's just to let me track at the end. And then I write it down, and then I know, and then I can help people. Because sometimes when a YouTuber might say, add enough water till it looks right, there are some people who are new at this and they don't know what looks right yet. And they're having trouble. And so they need something a little bit more objective. And so that's why I measure my water. It also lets me compare. If I get to the end of the shave and I'm using a Dr. John's soap, and then I remember that yesterday I used a Barrister and Mann soap, and wow, this Dr. John's soap used a different amount of water. That tells me a little bit of something about the soap, doesn't it? Okay, as you now look at here, we are getting increase in quantity. It is changing a little bit in texture. Okay, now texture is something I think is very important to pay attention to as you learn when to stop adding water. Right now, you see on the brush, very smooth, rounded texture right there. It's glossy. You can see that gleam. Well, that part right there has more water in it than some of the other parts in the bowl. Okay, and with different bases, there are other more conventional bases that have been around for a while. See, Soft Heart is a little different. I'll probably have to do another video with one of the more conventional bases because Soft Heart is different enough to where it's not going to be a good example for certain kinds, because there's a crater look that a lather will have in the very beginning when it's in need of more water. And I don't know that the Soft Heart here is going to be a good example of that. But the good news is there are certain soaps that are similar to this. They are kind of low and gluey and not high in structure. Sometimes people use the word structure to talk about these kind of soaps, and so now do you see a little bit of the solidity here? Do you see the points that have been pulled up? Do you see you can see that it's glossy, but it's not melting down, it's not moving, it's holding itself up on the wall. That's an attribute to look at. Just because it's glossy doesn't mean it has enough water. Also, it's possible for a soap to have enough water, to have just the right amount of water, and not be glossy. I've definitely seen that bit of misinformation, broadcast on the internet before in shaving forums. And I guess the person who said that just happens to be using a soap that does gloss up for him at the right time. But not all soaps do that. And so we're just adding a bit of water at a time. When you're new, it's probably better to add in smaller amounts. Once especially if you choose a soap base to use consecutively, then you may discover I can just dump all I usually use maybe 20 milliliters of water, for this amount of loading that I did. And you can just pour the 20 milliliters in, and you're fine, right? We should start to see the lather change as we keep adding water. Look, we keep increasing in volume. We've still got the gloss. Now some of those jaggedy edges are starting to smooth out. Okay. So yeah, I think my Lather Attributes video here might have to be in two parts, because I have definitely seen two kinds of soap bases, and this is that kind of gluey low kind. And so the majority of soaps out there are not going to be like this. The hazard that I've had with this kind of low structure type of lather that's all gluey is that I will sometimes keep adding water when I need to stop. They're gluey because they have some oils, like maybe castor oil or some different oils and butters that prevent them from kind of foaming up and having more structure. And so you got to treat them differently. These kinds of oils have been added to these soap bases in the efforts of helping with skin moisturization during the shave and an increased moisturization after. See, now take a look at that. We have virtually no sudden sharp peaks like before. We have continued to increase in volume. We are maintaining a nice gloss with this one, but it's still holding itself in place. Another thing you can do to help yourself diagnose a little bit is to pull it all down into the bottom corner of your bowl, get under it and lift about half of it up and watch what it does. Watch how it collapses. Watch how thin the walls are as it collapses. Now see, look, this guy he's just very fluid. His in relation to his weight, he's collapsing pretty quickly. I think I better not take him any further. He looks about right for this gluey kind of lather. And if you make a mistake, it's okay. You can, a good soap, like Barrister and Mann here, even if you miss either too dry or a little too wet, you're still going to get a very good quality lather to help you with your shave. I'm also thankful that today I'm finally shaving with just 24 hours of growth, and that's something I haven't really done with the Era so far. A couple hours more than that, but generally, it just happens to be my schedule's been super busy, and it's like a 2 or 3 day growth, and I have wanted the Era to be used on a more normal day, and that's what today is. All right, I got my face wet. I meant to do it before I started mixing up the lather. So again, this is bowl lathering, where we either go and load from a puck of soap onto the brush, so then it's got concentrate. We then take that to the bowl and work it up like I just did, or you do it exactly like I just did and smear some soap into the bottom of your bowl, bring the wet brush to it, work it up. Okay, you can start two different ways. And now once you get your feet wet, once you get a bunch of shaves under your belt, I mean, you can do whatever method you want. You can start bowl lathering and switch to face, or just anything you want to. It's up to you. There are not really any wrong answers. Even if it's not an efficient shave, even if it takes longer than everybody else, if that's your value, if that's what you enjoy, then it's not wrong. When you stop adding water, it's also going to depend on your own lather preferences. If you like your lather like I like mine, then my little landmarks are going to be, of course, very relevant to you. I can feel the backbone here, very scrubby little brush. Now, some people, if the lather is flying off of the brush just like that, that's a hallmark that they feel like they are getting the right lather. They have hydrated it enough. I often like to have it not quite be that wet, just so it's not just all over the bathroom. And some people say if it ain't dripping, you're tripping, meaning it needs to be dripping to get a good shave, and this is certainly dripping. But look, it's not opaque. It's holding together. It's holding together well. I'm sorry, it's not just totally translucent. It's opaque in parts. It's going to be very slick. It's going to do the job really well. In my personal opinion, it's better to err on the side of hydration, because a slightly overly wet lather will probably protect you a little better than a slightly underwet lather will. Another myth about bowl lathering is that you just put it on your face and then you go and you don't get to enjoy your brush very much. Well, you've been watching me now for a couple of minutes work this brush on my face. And part of that is because I enjoy it, but another part is you need to get that lather kind of connected, bonded with your skin, absorb some of it into your skin so that it protects you well. And by the time you do that, I often find that I have I've been able to enjoy my brush very nicely. So it's not just a paint and go kind of thing. At least it's your choice. It doesn't have to be that way. I advise that it not be that way so that you can get a well-conditioned skin surface. As you mix up your lather, you can feel it with your fingers as you go to kind of gauge how it's coming together. But different soaps will have different kinds of slicknesses. It's very funny. Sometimes it's a fuzzy kind of slickness. Sometimes it's the kind where it seems slick at first, but then when you wipe your thumb wipes from your fingertips the lather and it comes back, it's all gone. I don't usually like those soaps. I don't classify those as really good soaps. But then some of them leave behind a kind of a milky level of slickness. Sometimes it's an oily kind of slickness. Sometimes it's a thick, greasy kind of slickness that's almost like it's going to be a slow razor movement, but that slickness is not gonna go anywhere. It's there, it's just a little more slow, and there are different kinds. All right. So here we go. So there we go. That in terms of working the lather up, that is it. That's with this particular kind of lather. This is Barrister and Mann Soft Heart. There are a few others like this soap base that stay kind of low and gluey. I think Excelsior was that way. Milksteak might be kind of this way. Probably not as bad though. The new Omnibus base might be that way too with Barrister and Mann. I don't think Sterling is quite this way. Noble Otter, Summer Break. I don't think they're quite the same way. We'll do another one of those shaves here soon, and we'll look at those same kind of landmarks, see which ones apply to those other bases. So here we are, and it's pretty comfortable going here, moving through the hair nicely. Light touch. I am holding it kind of across the whole razor, but it's kind of a light. The razor has the ability to move as I'm using it. I'm not being really rigid with my grip. I'm just holding it enough to keep it safely in my grip so it doesn't fall or touch my skin in a way that I don't want it to. Matter of fact, right now, I am touching the bottom here of the razor, but it's almost like I'm cradling it. And I'm not focusing on, I'm going on very light pressure. I'm not really thinking about let's get rid of all these hairs. My focus in my mind is let's just lightly move this over the skin surface. And when I get to this neck area where the skin's a little more picky, I will lift my chin up to tighten the skin up a little bit. Some people find that they like to reach across and grab their sideburn and raise that up so that their cheek is tightened. But I find, I get a just a fine shave even if I don't do that. And so I don't need to, but you could try that and see if you like the results. All right, so that's level 1. It's his mildest base. And yesterday, when I shaved with it, it got me through that first pass, but it did leave quite a bit of stubble left over. Most other razors don't leave that much after the first pass. However, the second and third passes yesterday made up for it just fine. Same thing today. I still felt quite a bit of stubble left over. If you don't want that, if you want a more efficient shave, then yeah, sure, bump it up. Go for the level 3, probably. I found that the level 2 was a slight increase, and the level 3 was kind of a better increase. And what I did now, you see, look at the lather. It's a little creamier, a little more dry looking than that first pass, right? Well, you know what I did? I dried my face off with a towel between passes. And so then we kind of leached, is what it seems like it's doing, some of the water out of the lather to reduce its hydration content than that first pass. But that first pass, as you saw, it performed in terms of protection, protected me very well. Now I'm going to do cross grain here. Still, no matter what kind of grip I'm using, I'm focusing on a light touch with the lathers as hydrated as you see me do. One of the nice perks about that is I never have any razor buildup. See, look, it's just dripping out of my razor. It's easy to clear the razor. I don't get any lather buildup at all. I like the mild razors in that you can hit areas multiple times and the mildness keeps the blade in check so that you don't end up giving yourself a lot of razor burn. A little rinsing now. And just like the other pass, I dabbed my skin dry so that this lather here can be just a little bit more kind of creamy than what's in the bowl here. This little brush, as you can see, look at the splay. He still splays quite a bit. Fairly easy to splay, not hard work to splay, despite having the backbone that he does. And I cannot wait to put this guy through some hairdryer treatments and watch those tips split, because that is what you're hoping for with a Boar brush as it matures, because more tips equals more softness. All right. Oh, how much water did we use in the end? There, 28 milliliters of water for that. I guess it was a quarter teaspoon plus maybe a third after that, you know, something around that. The lather looks great on my skin. When you're making your lather, if it's completely opaque on your skin, I would consider adding more water next time you use it and trying that out. Because I've found that most of the time a lather that's hydrated where I personally like it, really well hydrated while still having a light creaminess to it, is often a little bit translucent. And so if you haven't tried that, if you do try it and don't like it, hey, at least you know that it's not for you, right? But I have found that the drier a lather is, or the lather you're looking at right now, is more protective and slicker than those drier lathers. And YouTube is just deluged with face lathering YouTube shavers who like a very pasty, opaque lather. And there's nothing wrong with that if they're shaving with a lather that they like. Nothing wrong with it at all. And again, we're moving nice and easy. The lather's being very slick and enjoyable. The third pass, definitely with this head, has more stable stubble to try to cut down, because the earlier passes leave more for it than other razors do usually. But hey, as long as it gets done by 3 passes, I'm fine with that personally. I don't care if the last pass has to do 20% of the work. Normally the last pass might have to do 3 to 5% of the work maybe. I'm going to do a fourth pass on my, kind of a touch-up pass on my neck here. So I do think that this #1 head has a place in the market. I'm glad Scott did it, because there are people who like razors even milder than I like razors, and that's saying something. The 68 Razor Rock Game Changer solid bar is too mild for me to really enjoy. Feather ASD2, unless I put a feather blade in it or maybe one other blade, same thing. It's too mild for me to really get a good cut out of. Of course, it's very comfortable, but I just don't get a close cut. There may be another razor out there that I'm forgetting, but this level 1 seems to be right around that point for me. And that it's basically taking about 4 passes to get the job done. And so I don't think I will be using this plate very much if I keep the era around. Even the AA plate for the carve is a little bit more efficient than this, while actually probably being a little bit more comfortable for me. And so if I had to choose between the carve and the era, I've used the era now about 4 or 5 times, and I kind of think I favor the carve a little better. Get a good rinse thing now. Another diagnostic tool that you can use is the rinses as you're shaving. You've just finished shaving that first pass of stubble off. You've rinsed your razor. You now go to kind of splash some water on your face and clear away the stubble. And you can use that time, those moments, to feel of your stubble. You can tell, of course, how efficient the razor is being, but also feel your face for the lather. If you take your hands, your wet hands, you put some water, splash it up on your face, and all of a sudden your face comes alive with what seems like creamy goodness where it wasn't there before, probably means you have a lather you could have added more water to if you wanted to. And if it feels almost like it's so thick that you could even shave with it, then you could definitely add more water there next time you put together that bowl of lather or that brush full of lather if you're a face lather. You could definitely put more water into that if you want to. And I definitely recommend at least 1 or 2 test lathers where you take a little break, and maybe you don't choose to shave at that moment, but you take a soap base that you really enjoy and you whip it up in a bowl and you keep adding water until it dies. Keep adding water, and then maybe take your face, put a little bit on your face, and then keep adding water. You may then rinse it off and monitor how it feels on your face, then rinse it off, and then keep adding water, and then put that sample on your face. See how it feels, and keep adding water until it just doesn't hold together anymore. And watch the landmarks, watch the traits as you go. Well, in terms of this kind of soap base that stays, I keep using the word gluey because I can't really think of a better one, that is kind of a thick, oily kind of slickness there. Its weight due to the hydration can be seen by how it's moving there. Look at those long peaks. Sometimes a good attribute of a lather is when you have your brush full of lather and you hold it up like this, it slowly starts creeping down your brush. You may like a lather that behaves like that. There are a lot of lather porn videos, and I mean that figuratively speaking, where a person has globbed a bunch of lather on top of a brush and set it on their sink and then taken a picture of it to say, hey, here's my awesome lather, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. However, if it sits up like an ice cream cone in a big peak, usually to me that's not nearly wet enough. And now, of course, I'm not saying he's wrong to do that, or that he's wrong to have that kind of lather. If he likes it that dry, then that is fine. But there's more slickness to be had if that person wanted it by adding more water. And so a lot of times if a lather is kind of dripping down the brush slowly, that's a good sign to me that I've hit the right spot. So when you do have a lather, like in this case, it might have been a little too wet for me, then I mitigated that, helped it out a little bit by drying off my face between passes, and it worked perfectly. If I have a lather in the beginning that's a little thicker than I might want in the first pass, often if it's just a little thicker than I want, I don't do anything because the rinse is going to rehydrate my face, leave behind some water, right? And then I find that the second and third pass are perfect. I've had that happen so many times. If it's a lot too thick, then if you're bowl lathering, then the great thing is just keep adding water to the bowl and mixing it up. And with a bowl, if you already shave off your first pass, you discover, you know what? Let's add more water. That's all you do. Just add more water to your bowl. Don't overdo it, but there you go. You can also fine tune it while it's on your face there by dribbling a few bits of water on top of your razor brush and then working that in. You can do that too. All right, so hopefully if you have this kind of a gluey type base, chiseled face silk tallow might be another base that would behave like this. Other low structure bases. But next time we will do a base that's more conventional. the majority of them, and we'll look for some of those landmarks as well. All right. So a comfortable shave. I enjoyed the Era. It is a level 1 plate that I probably won't revisit very much at all, because level 2 is still comfortable for me, doesn't generate any irritation at all. And so then it has a little bit more efficiency, and I get a closer shave at the end of 3 passes. Whereas this one, I almost feel like, well, actually my bottom area here probably could use a couple. This is a trouble spot, and so it's kind of common for that to need a little bit more work, but even my cheeks I didn't do those. I could have really should have done a full 4th pass instead of the neck only, but it's all right. I'm working from home. It looks fine. All right, so there we go. The Amazelnut. It's a very, very light scent once it's in lather form here. It's much more intense when I'm smelling the dry soap, the unlathered soap. So that's kind of a distinctly gourmand in its scent. And honestly, it was almost like having good incense. I mean, sometimes you know how you kind of lift coffee or hot chocolate up to your nose and you kind of just inhale it for a second as a part of your pre-drink ritual. If you do that, then you might really enjoy, having some of this Amazelnut sitting around your office or your desk and just sniffing on it every once in a while. I did. But once it got into lather form, it was quite reduced, and it's definitely not overwhelming at all. I feel like I'm shaving with a scent of any kind of food product. It's just it almost smells more like a tonka bean, kind of item. There are other soaps that have that tonka smell, and so it's really more akin to them. They're very enjoyable. I could easily shave with it a lot, and so it's not strong enough, so I don't think I would get tired of it. Especially a warm family holiday with lots of good feels. This guy might just fit right in with the whole vibe. He really might. As you can see, we do have a little bit of soap left with that bit of more than a 1/4 teaspoon. And it looks like I think I'm glad I added that extra bit, because I could probably squeeze 2 more passes out of what I have. But this is pretty much the exact right amount of lather I like to have at the end of the shave. Also, another way to test your lather is to pull up a lot of it in your brush and do what I just did and shake it off. And look at the shape as it lands. Does it change shape at all when it lands? If it has a lot of water and a lot of weight to it, it'll kind of flatten out a little bit. If it could maybe use some more water, sometimes the shape doesn't change at all. Also, sometimes you might run into a vegan soap that could have different landmarks, or you may want to stop adding water a little more soon than a tallow soap might. I've had that happen plenty of times as well. All right, we've gotten a good rinse. And so, you know what I thought might be good with almost a gourmand shaving soap is this Brandy Spice from Clubman, a sample I got at a local mega beauty supply mart. And the notes it says are a bold scent with brandied apple, mixed spice, and musk notes. I've worn this once before, and I remember liking it. I think I remember smelling the apple in there and the spices. Let's see what I recall. Not a lot of good stuff in this particular product for your skin, but since this is such a smooth shave, it's definitely not in need of any kind of repairing balm. So I felt good about picking an alcohol splash. Yeah, that's enjoyable. You definitely get the brandied apples and the spices, but it's not overwhelming at all. I like it. All right. I bet my kids might not mind this as much as some of my other like leather and smoke type of soaps and scents and aftershaves. Well, there we go. Just a little bit of cleaning up now is all we need to do. I told you about the performance of the soap and the razor, and the brush did well. I might just do a hairdryer treatment right now, and I'll blip back to you after I've done it. Let me wash it off first and I'll show it to you. Okay, here's how it looks after a good stropping on the towel, a good rinse out, good work on the towel up and down some. Now let's go hair dry him And here we are. Looks a lot better, doesn't it? Part of it is just the fact that it's dry, but I believe we are seeing a little bit more splitting because of that just one treatment. And I like that it's not a ton more splitting with one treatment, because I think in this case a little bit at a time might help the splits to happen more safely, and I'm more about that than I am the speed. And so I just basically hair dried it across the top until the tips were dry. And I use warm but high speed. I don't know if a high heat would be better or worse. I'm just assuming it would be a little bit more violent. So sticking with the low temperature, the warm temperature. And there we go. I think he looks very different than what he did even when I picked him up before the shave, before he even got wet. I think there's a difference. And so this is, if he works out great after some uses, then that's really a lot of hope for the Semogue line, because many of them did move to the extra grade. Now, this is a tiny little handle. Sometimes he's a little hard to grip when he gets all soapy. It's a short brush, maybe a good travel brush, but he had such a great vintage look, and they're so inexpensive. I couldn't help but pull the trigger on him, and I'm glad I did, because he's my only extra brush, the one that has the extra bristles. And of course now I guess I could buy any number of Hereditas line, and there's a much larger selection that have the extra bristles now. This is the painted wood, and so make sure when you soak it before you shave, I maybe let the water line come up just above the painted, and I don't let it get close, because it can cause the wood to swell if you let it sit for too long, and then it'll crack, as you can probably see has happened to mine already. I know by experience. So the Amazelnut was enjoyable, and I think the Brandy Spice is actually working very well with the Amazelnut. It's a transitional thing. I don't think the Amazelnut's really hanging around very much right now, but it was a very easy and kind of natural transition from one scent to the other, which is enjoyable. I think we talked about everything. There we go. I hope there was something in this shave that helps you out as a shaver. This is Sugar Daddy Shaves. You guys, take care.